There we go. Well, hello, everybody, and thank you for watching the Storytelling Alchemist show here on the Los Angeles Tribune's Roku TV network. Everybody, I hope you have had an amazing week. I have an amazing guest on the line today with us. Her name is Judith Valente, and we're going to be talking about her book. Let me pull it up here on the screen really quick so you all can see it, because I want you guys to jump onto Amazon and purchase it right now. And so we're going to be talking about her work in her book, How to Be a Monk and a Journalist, Reflect on Living and Dying, Purpose and Prayer, Forgiveness and Friendship. Her co-author is Paul Quinnen. Did I get that correctly, Judith?
Did indeed.
Good. So, I'm looking forward to talking about her work. And I guess let's just jump right into it, Judith. How did this, I know this, it started off as an interview, am I correct? Or a conversation that you had before this
Yeah, book? I was reporting on religion for PBS TV for many years, a news program called Religion and Ethics News Weekly. And I was sent to Gethsemane Abbey, where Brother Paul lives outside of Louisville. And I was actually sent there because we were doing a piece on the enduring legacy of Thomas Merton, the great Trappist monk and spirituality writer. And I asked to interview monks who had known Merton, and lucked upon Brother Paul, who had been a novice when Merton was the novice director, and Merton had been his spiritual director. So he knew Merton quite closely. And during the course of that interview, he mentioned that he writes a haiku, a 3-line Japanese poem, every day as part of his meditative practice. And this kind of appealed to me because I'm a journalist, but I also write poetry. I've written 2 poetry collections, been published. And we began this haiku exchange, believe it or not, for 3 years. And that became the basis of our first book together, The Art of Pausing, Meditations for the Overworked and Overwhelmed. And over the years, I've been corresponding with Brother Paul, the lost art of letter writing, Jeremy. And one day, I was reading through these letters and I thought, wow, there's so much wisdom in what Brother Paul writes. And there's so many insights here, not only into the spiritual life, but also practical things of life. I was writing to him about thinking of changing a job. And I was writing to him about some struggles I was having in some friendships. And lo and behold, realized that monks have many of the same struggles that we do in our lives. And, we decided to sort of start intentionally writing to each other as if someone else was going to read these letters as well. And that became the current book, How to Be, which you graciously just showed on the screen there.
It's interesting. I was just thinking, because I've always made a joke, and you've kind of corrected me in a sense, because I've always said, we're not monks. We aren't able to sit in a monastery or in a cave somewhere over in India or somewhere and have it quiet in our life where we can work on this every day. We're working, we're doing all this stuff. And, it sounds like the monks have just as many of, the challenges, I guess, as we do. Even though we're out in work, it seems like the work's the same or similar. Maybe the circumstances are a little different.
And something a big takeaway that I learned from Brother Paul, and that I hope people will take away from the book, is that you don't have to run off to an ashram in India or a monastery to be able to live a more contemplative life. There's some small steps we can take. Brother Paul is big about getting out in nature, for example, and practicing periods of silence. We live in such a talky, boisterous, noisy society. But trying to make of your life at times both an island of silence and an island of peace. And just some simple practices. I was having some difficulties with some coworkers, and he was talking about working in the monastery kitchen. He's been a cook at the Abbey of Gethsemane for, 30 years or something like that. And he was having a lot of trouble there for a period of time. And, just a simple thing like, just stop those thoughts when you have them. Stop those thoughts, those angry thoughts that you have about other people. Just stop them. Stop them in their tracks when they come into your mind, and just intentionally not speaking ill of other people.
Right.
I mean, think about that for a minute. That's something we can all do, and would just add so much to the peace of the world.
Yeah. Well, and I think about like how often, as spiritual as I've become in my life, there's still that one person that triggers my button. Here in a maybe it might be a lot less than it used to be. But, and then of course, what do? You go turn to your people, your loved ones, or your friends, and you're like, that person just really frustrated me, or for whatever you got annoyed. And that's still speaking ill, instead of even actually going to that person and talking to them about whatever it is, or just letting it go, is another big one. So that's some wisdom there. So
Yeah, absolutely. I think, those are things that Brother Paul would advocate as well. And I must say that he would have loved to be here today to talk with you, Jeremy, but he is on retreat this whole week. So we don't want to deprive him of his retreat time.
Yeah, there's I can't even remember there. It's a monastery that's not far from Louisville. I think it's close to Bardstown, Kentucky. And I've gone there a couple times just because it's just, for an afternoon, it's so quiet and so contemplative. And so, you get to just really spend some time. And I think that one of the things you mentioned earlier is that, this world is so busy, I guess, in a sense, that we don't take time for ourselves. And every self-help guru talks about taking time for yourself, and we don't. And so quieting your mind, I think, brings a lot of these answers, right?
I love that simple meditative practice that Brother Paul has of writing a 3-line poem, a 3-line haiku every day as part of his meditation practice, just one of them. But I mean, it's something that we can all do, because when you're writing those 3 lines, or you're looking for them, you're listening and looking for what will be those 3 lines for the day. And so already you're becoming more attentive to the world around you, to the people around you. You're listening, you're looking. And, just something as simple as that, I think is a contemplative practice that doesn't require getting on a plane, or, interrupting your life for 2-3 weeks or 3 months.
Yeah, well, that's true. It takes a lot less time, but I also like the time where I'm, or maybe a retreat once a year, like what he's doing right now, and having that time for himself, or you're taking time to be in another place to write a book and stuff like that to inspire you. I think that's really amazing, and that we just don't take time for ourselves like that.
Yeah, he told me something interesting about when he goes on retreats. A lot of people will go on retreat and they'll bring a dozen books with them to read. They'll bring a couple of journal books that they expect to fill. And he told me something really interesting. He said that he takes his retreats in Thomas Merton's Hermitage on the grounds of the Abbey. So it's this little cinder block cabin, really, that's a ways away from the monastery, but it's still on the monastery grounds. And he says he just sits on the porch sometimes and does absolutely nothing. Now think of the last time that you took 10 minutes even to do absolutely nothing.
Yeah.
It almost goes against our American character.
Yeah.
To say, I sat down for an hour and I did nothing. But, at the same time, he's listening to the birds. He's looking at the trees. He is doing something. He's feeding his soul in some way. And another thing he does, which I've done with him, is he goes out in the grass and walks barefoot. And sometimes he even dances. He puts on, Bruckner, or, some other piece of classical music, and he goes out and he just sways to the music. And I've seen him do this, and I've done it with him. And so that's what I'm talking about, Jeremy, about the things we can do in our everyday lives.
Yeah. Yeah. So that really I'm just really thinking about how you're right. I go on vacation. I was just in Hawaii over the the holiday, and so I'm sitting on the beach in Maui, and I went to grab my journal that I brought with the purpose of filling, well, with the purpose of inspiring my next book and stuff like that. So, but there was part of me, I was like, I really don't want to do this. I just want to sit here, and it makes a lot of sense that we go into this situation, like you meant, to take 12 books because we have a purpose in our mind that has to be completed by the time, because it couldn't just be me going to Maui and just being there, so.
I had an interesting exchange with Brother Paul in one of the letters where I told him that, I had left my job at an NPR affiliate, daily journalism job, to write books. And I told him I feared that I was wasting too much time every day. And he said in one of the letters, I have some advice for you. My advice, if you're worried about wasting too much time, is to go out and waste more of it. Just waste it intentionally. And you know what? One day I just did that. I was tired. I had been writing and I was tired, and I just lay down and took a nap in the middle of the day. And guess what happened? The world didn't stop. The world didn't collapse because I took a nap in the middle of the day. And I still got, my quota of writing done, even though I had stopped to take a nap. But my body was telling me that it needed some rest. And I think that's what he meant. He meant by waste your time intentionally.
Well, I think he also says to you, because I think you ask about, what is you're going down the subject of the purpose of life. And he said, what, basically in a sense what if there is no purpose of life other than what you make it?
He actually said the purpose of life is life. It's to live your life. That's what he said. And, I suspect, Jeremy, you're a little bit like me in that, you're an overachiever and you're a bit of a, sounds like a bit of a workaholic. And so it was very liberating when he began to talk about, the purpose of your life is to live your life. You don't really have to knock yourself out and feel like you earned your place in this world. You wouldn't be here if you hadn't already, for some reason in God's mind, earned your place in this world. And so that was a really liberating little revelation that I got from him early on.
So there you go, folks. Everybody just go out and live your life and enjoy your life. and so that's that small statement. Well, the two we've done, go out and waste more time, because follow what your soul or your body needs, and then go, just live your life. Is going to hit buttons for everybody, because you're right. We're so used to looking for some type of purpose instead of just going out there enjoying it. And I think that's great. And then the other stuff just kind of falls in balance, right?
Well, yeah, I'm sure some of exactly, it does fall into balance. And I'm sure some of your listeners are thinking, well, this woman's nuts, what if we all did that? Nothing would get done. But let me give you an example. I was a journalist for many years, worked for the Washington Post. That's where I started my career. Wall Street Journal, went on to People magazine. And I remember one time I had a piece to finish for People magazine. It was really giving me a lot of trouble. Couldn't figure out how to get into the piece, how to organize it. And I literally never left the office for 24 hours. I just stayed there overnight, drinking coffee, trying to write this article. Do you think that article got written that day in that 24 hours? No. I would have been much better off if I went home, I slept on it, I let my unconscious unwind a little bit, try to unwind what was blocking me. And that happened to me too, working for the Wall Street Journal. I remember spending the night in the office. The cleaning people came in at the night, and then the morning cleaning crew came in, and I was still in the same spot, and my story still wasn't done. So there is something about, letting the mind reboot and giving yourself time to refresh yourself.
When they call that a REM state, you have to go into that REM state of sleep,
right?
So that your creativity. Yeah, I'm a corporate training manager, and of course, if I don't have creativity, I'm going to be in a little bit of trouble, just because that's just the nature of the work, So I used to work from 9 in the morning until at midnight, and I take a lot of time for myself. It's like one of those things where I think that, for the listeners out there, you have to take a break for yourself and enjoy your life, like we were mentioning. Otherwise, all that work that even if you enjoy it, is not gonna, you're gonna lose that, I guess, nourishment that you get from it eventually, because you get burnt out.
Yeah, burnout, I think, is a far greater problem than people wasting too much time, particularly in the United States of America. I ran across a statistic. In fact, it's in my next to my previous book, Before How to Be, where I think it's, we on average we get only 2 weeks of vacation in the United States. I mean, Europeans get 4 to 6 weeks of vacation, and their economies are humming along, just as well as ours. But the real kicker for me was that something like 17% of Americans never even take their full complement of vacation. Never even take it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, when we don't, most of us get like 2 weeks of vacation in a lot of cases. So I mean, use it.
Right.
Well, this has changed over the last couple of years. People would come into work sick. And now, of course, if you're sick, most people take their sick days, although half of us are all working at home. So, but it's one of those things where, at least take time to rest your body so you can get better. But, that was never a part of the paradigm here in the United States or in other parts of the world. So.
No, and it's funny you should mention that, the pandemic, Jeremy, because Brother Paul had these requests for interviews when the pandemic happened. I mean, people wanted to hear from a monk, because suddenly we were all sort of living monk-like lives, in our little cells wherever we happen to be living. And one thing I think the pandemic taught us, if we allowed it, was how to be alone with ourselves. Yeah, and I think I'm sad to say that many people can't stand their own company, and I think that the pandemic has forced us to take a look at our lives too, and what we were doing with them, and look what's happening. I mean, people are resigning from jobs, or they're not going back to the jobs they had, because I think that they are examining their lives as a result of the pandemic.
Yeah, I mean, that's exactly what happened with me. I'd always been very, very go, 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 go. And the pandemic, well, the first month, I had never really been alone in like almost 10 years, because I have like a great group of friends and all that other kind of stuff. And I thought there, and I was bored. And for the first time in 10 years, depression started to come in. And I was like, wow, that's an interesting feeling. But at the same time, what it did is I did a lot of cool things interpersonally. And I know this is for a lot of the listeners, because I talked to a lot of them, and so they did the same thing. And I drew a line in the sand and said, I'm never going back into an office. And I got a job where my headquarters is out of Los Angeles, and I live in Florida, so I'm good. And it's one of those things where I think that you're right. The pandemic did a lot of things where people said, I don't want to do this. I've been doing it out of what I thought was necessity. Even a lot of the workers working in restaurants, a lot of them I knew took that extra money, went back to college, started businesses and stuff like that, which I thought was refreshing, because it turned something that is a negative situation into a positive for themselves. And I thought that was pretty incredible to watch. So.
Yeah, absolutely. It's that old saying of Joseph Campbell's, the mythologist and the philosopher: follow your bliss.
Mm-hmm.
And when you follow your bliss, the invisible hands will come out to help you. And I really think there is something to that.
Yeah. So going into this, there's probably a lot deeper of subject, but I think we touched on quite a bit here. I mean, this is really about enjoying life, letting go, I think, in a lot of ways that we've talked about over the last little bit of time. And I imagine there's quite a bit in there about, if you're letting go, forgiveness to me is a part of letting go, and so what are some other things that Brother Paul talked about, or the discussions, because this is a dialogue between the two of you, like and so.
Yeah, he always treated me as kind of a spiritual equal, even though I'm hardly that. I mean, here's a man who spent 60 plus years in the contemplative life and knows Greek and Latin and probably reads Hebrew too. I'm not sure, but my guess is that he does. And so he's read the scriptures and everything in their original languages. I think some big takeaways. I mean, this is a book, if you're interested, for example, in theology. He writes a lot about the resurrection. What does that mean? What does that mean for our lives now?
Mm-hmm.
So it would be hard for me to explain, because he does it so well in the book. But then there's a lot of things about how to deal with disappointment,
Mm-hmm.
how to deal with unexpected challenges. During the course of the book, I got this cancer diagnosis, breast cancer
Oh, wow.
diagnosis. Yeah, and I'm a person who never even takes an aspirin, is never sick. And I went up to Mayo Clinic, and it turned out that it wasn't breast cancer. It was not. And I had been misdiagnosed, believe it or not, but joyfully I was misdiagnosed. And yet we had some talks about that. I mean, what do you pray for when you get a diagnosis like that? And I talked about how I really prayed for the other people that I saw up at the Mayo Clinic, the people who really did have cancer, and the people who didn't get the good news that I got up at the Mayo Clinic. And he thought that was a very worthwhile thing to do when you have an illness like that, is to pray for other people who are in your same shoes. And then he talked about some of the monks he knew that had died, and he talked about how some just really want to hold on to life, and that he wasn't going to do that. That there's a time to live. What is it in Ecclesiastes? There's a time to live and a time to die. And he thought if he was faced with a serious diagnosis, that he would just go along with it and realize that there's a finite, our lives are finite and they have to come to an end. And as one philosopher wrote, what's important is whether you write a good story with your life, and to keep writing, to keep trying to write a good story with your life. And therefore you won't have that regret at the end. Because when I got that diagnosis, everything came into, I don't know if that's ever happened to you, Jeremy, but, everything comes into play. Have I done this with my life? Well, what if I had done that with my life? So, I think what he taught me was just to keep going along. And, maybe next year or this year, I might get a real cancer diagnosis. So to just keep trying to make a good story of my life.
Yeah, I haven't necessarily had that diagnosis for myself, but my mother was in 2012 diagnosed with uterine cancer. And we found out about 3 days before Christmas, 2011. And she died on January 9th. But what the lesson in it for me was, of course, I had the show. I'd had the show probably about a year at that point in time. And so I reached out to every healer I knew, including all the ones I've interviewed over the last year, to send her energy, because she basically on Christmas Day could have died. She over-medicated on her pain medication by accident. And I dialed 911. But long story short, that energy gave us another 2 weeks of she and I just like working together and talking to each other, and me just kind of grieving before I had the chance to grieve, if that makes any sense.
Yes.
So that I was able to hear her as soon as she stepped out of the body. I could hear her
Yes.
talking to me. And so, what it kind of did for me in a sense is, I watched her because I said, well, we can save you. I have all these, I've called some people and they can help us. She goes, and she grabbed my hand. It was one of the last words she said to me. And she said, I think I'm ready to go, with all the peace in the world. So one of the things you were talking about when he's saying, I just want to let it come in, so to speak, is the peacefulness that I feel when he's talking about that. And even when you're talking about going through your experience, and now the aftermath, it sounds like the peace you found with that. And I think that's, I usually ask what last minute of wisdom you would like to give the author, the audience, but I think you kind of gave it. Maybe I'm wrong. That's just my interpretation of it. Just found the peace you found in it.
It would make me very happy if you feel that piece of wisdom has gone out. Thank you.
Yeah. Well, it's really powerful because when we think about, a lot of us do have this fear of death, and it's not just physical death. We have the fear of like all the urgency of working when you're at the Wall Street Journal. I can imagine when I was a vice president of a company and all that, how do I hold on to this job? And I was just laughing the other day and, talking with some friends and, saying, hey, it doesn't matter how much money you make, somehow you're going to find a way to spend it. And so, what it was telling me is that, there is always this opportunity, instead of just letting go and allowing life, as we say we've been saying, to live, we cause and bring in more stress. More income comes in, so we can have some disposable, and what we do, we fill it in with more things, with more stuff, and so it's out of balance in a sense. And I just find it super interesting. We kind of kill our peace because we're constantly the energy of chaos, I guess, is in a sense. But lots of cool stuff. So, well, I'm excited, and you're working on your next book right now. Am I correct? So
right, yeah, I'm actually speaking to you from a small town in Italy, in the region of Abruzzo, on the east side of Italy, on the Adriatic coast. And I've long wanted to write, it really flows from this book. I've long wanted to write about a book about what Americans can learn from Italians about the good life. And, it's just going to be little vignettes of experiences over here that taught me something about how to live more simply and more joyfully. And again, the Italians are great at finding ways to enjoy life that don't cost a lot of money. You don't have to get on a plane to do it. You don't have to make a killing on Wall Street to live well.
Yeah.
And there's all sorts of little things that I've come across here. Their sense of community, for one, their sense of esteem for elders. Of course, the family connections. It's not unusual for the same family to live in the same house, in the same city, on the same block for generations. We think we've lost that in America. I grew up in a house that my grandparents lived in, and my aunt and uncle lived upstairs as well. But we've lost that. We've replaced that with this notion that mobility equals climbing the status ladder. And we've lost a sense of stability in our country, which, again, the pandemic reminded us of what stability feels like. And so, there's an emphasis here on quality. In the United States, where we can buy a lot of things really cheaply, but they're cheap. The quality isn't there. You look at the clothing. It's cheap. Food is cheap. Think of the dollar stores. I mean, the dollar stores were among the few stores that did very, very well in the pandemic. But here, people will buy less, but a higher quality of product.
Yeah. That reminds me of my grandfather. He'd be like, if you bought a couch, it had to be the best couch, the best quality, because he knew he was going to hold on to that couch for 10, 15, 20 years. And instead of just buying a couch like me, that I buy one every couple of years because, you get it looks nice when you get it, but, in a couple of years, it's usually kind of torn up. But yeah, I agree with you. And that's probably more discernful on their part, right? They probably spend time looking.
They spend time looking, and the odd thing is their life expectancy is much higher than it is in the U.S. People live longer here, in Italy, and I think part of it is, that, well, it's said, it's a well-known fact you can't get a bad meal in Italy, but that's because they're very particular about their ingredients. I mean, they were buying locally grown stuff. That's been a part of their culture for forever. And, we're just sort of waking up to that now. I mean, maybe the last 10, 15 years in the United States. And so, the quality of what you put in your food is important to them. The quality of the clothing that you wear is important to them. Their shoes, their shoes are gorgeous, but they last. I mean, they last. They're built to last. Our shoes are built to be thrown out in a year, and you go down to Payless or whatever, whatever your discount store is in your, yeah.
So Judith, do I feel you moving there permanently, or is this just a sabbatical for a while?
Yeah. Well, don't tell my husband. I'd love to move here permanently. I really would, but you can only spend 3 months if you're not a citizen, and then you have to go back, and then you have to have 3 months back in your home country, and you can come back. So we'll see. I might be eligible for dual citizenship because all of my grandparents were Italian. So
Gotcha.
I'm in the process of trying to track down some of their records, and see if I could get dual citizenship. And then I wouldn't have to worry about, leaving after 3 months if I wanted to come for longer.
Well, who knows? Maybe I have a job where I work at home. Maybe I'll take on your lead, and I'll go to Italy for 3 months and then come back home.
I highly recommend it. I highly recommend it.
Well, thank you so much, Judith. Let's just a reminder. They can find your book, I'm sure, on Amazon. Am I correct?
It's on Amazon.com. There's several reviews of it on Amazon.com, BarnesandNoble.com, IndieBoundBooks.com. So, I love to tell people to support their independent bookstores, support their local bookstores if they possibly can. The local bookstores would be more than happy to order any book for you if they don't have it in stock.
Yeah, I did that with my people when I put my first book out. I was like, just call Barnes and Noble. They'll put it on the bookshelf for you. As a matter of fact, they'll order yours and put 2 more on the shelf. So, everybody, this has been a great interview and a great energy. And Judith, thanks for coming on and spending time with us to talk about your work. And I'm sure when you're done with that book from Italy, we'll have you on the show as well and talk about that as well. So
thank you. It's been an honor for me to meet you, Jeremy, and I'd love to come back. Thank you.
And everybody, thank you for everybody for watching. As you know, I have Suzanne Ross coming on next week as well to talk about her retreat I'm going to be at in March in Sedona. So I'm pretty excited about that. And lots of great authors coming up, including I'm going to be doing a speakers panel on my philosophy of we're suffering from a global post-traumatic stress and some of the reasons why. So much love to everybody, and thank you again for supporting the show, and talk soon.